The sun was setting behind the mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico. The year was 1876, and life was hard for most people in this remote village. Maria Elena Vasquez stood outside her small adobe house, watching the orange sky fade to purple. She was 32 years old with dark hair that she kept tied back and hands that were rough from years of hard work. Maria Elena lived in the house with her husband Roberto and their 3 children. The house was small and made of mud bricks. It had only 2 rooms and a dirt floor. The roof was made of old wooden planks that leaked when it rained. There were no windows, just openings in the walls that they covered with old cloth at night. Their children were young. Ana was 8 years old, the oldest. She helped her mother with cooking and cleaning. Carlos was 6, and little Rosa was only 4. The children were thin, like most kids in the village. Food was hard to find, and money was even harder to get. Roberto worked at the local mine when there was work to be found. The mine was dangerous and the pay was very small. Many men in the village worked there because there were no other jobs. Roberto was a big man with strong arms, but he was often angry. When he drank alcohol, which was most nights, he became mean and violent. Maria Elena tried to keep the family together. Every morning, she would wake up before dawn to start the fire and make whatever food they had. Sometimes it was just cornmeal mixed with water. On good days, they might have beans or a small piece of meat. But good days were rare. The village where they lived was far from any big city. Most people, there were indigenous like Maria Elena's family. They spoke Spanish, but also their native language that had been passed down for hundreds of years. The Mexican government was fighting wars and there was trouble everywhere. People said there might be a revolution coming. Life in the village was simple but hard. There was no doctor, no school, and no police. If someone got sick, they used old remedies made from plants. Children learned what they needed to know from their parents. When there was trouble, the village elders tried to solve it. Maria Elena remembered when things were different. When she first married Roberto 10 years ago, he was kinder. He would bring her small gifts from the market when he had money. He would play with the children and tell them stories. But as the years passed and life got harder, Roberto changed. The mine work was dangerous and paid very little. Roberto often came home covered in dirt and coughing from the dust. He was always tired and sore. Some nights he could not sleep because his back hurt so much. Other workers had died in cave-ins or from breathing too much dust. Roberto knew he might die any day. To forget his pain and fear, Roberto started drinking more. At first, it was just a small cup of pulque on Sundays after church. But soon, he was drinking every night. The alcohol made him forget his troubles for a while, but it also made him angry and violent. When Roberto drank, he would shout at Maria Elena and the children. He would blame them for all his problems. He said they ate too much food and cost too much money. He would hit Maria Elena when she tried to calm him down. The children learned to hide when they heard their father coming home drunk. Maria Elena tried to make Roberto stop drinking, but nothing worked. She hid his money, but he would get angry and hit her harder. She asked the village priest to talk to him, but Roberto just laughed. She even threw away his bottles, but he always found. For the worst part was that the family was always hungry. Roberto spent most of his small wages on alcohol. There was never enough money left for food. Maria Elena would go days without eating so her children could have something. She became very thin, and her clothes hung loose on her body. Sometimes, Maria Elena would beg for food from neighbors, but they were poor too. Everyone in the village was struggling. The crops had been bad for 2 years because there was not enough rain. Even the rich families in the village were having trouble. Maria Elena tried to find work to help feed her family. She would wash clothes for other people or help with cooking at special events, but there was not much work for women and the pay was very small. Sometimes she would work all day and earn only enough to buy a small bag of cornmeal. At night, when the children were asleep, Maria Elena would lie awake and worry. She worried about finding food for tomorrow. She worried about Roberto's drinking getting worse. She worried about what would happen if he lost his job at the mine. Most of all, she worried about her children growing up hungry and afraid. Children could see that their mother was sad and scared. Anna, the oldest, tried to help by taking care of her younger brother and sister. She would tell them stories to distract them when their father was drunk and angry. Carlos would try to find small jobs around the village to earn a few coins. Little Rosa was too young to understand, but she could feel the tension in the house. Roberto's drinking got worse as time went on. He would come home later and later, stumbling and falling down. He would forget to eat the little food they had. Sometimes he would pass out on the floor, and Maria Elena would have to drag him to bed. Other times he would stay awake all night, talking to himself and breaking things. The neighbors started to avoid Roberto when they saw him coming. They knew he was unpredictable when he was drunk. Some of them felt sorry for Maria Elena and the children, but they were afraid to get involved. Domestic problems were considered private matters, and no one wanted to make Roberto angry. Maria Elena felt trapped and alone. She had no family nearby to help her. Her parents had died years ago, and her only sister lived far away. She could not read or write, so she could not send letters asking for help. She felt like she was drowning and no one could save her. As the months passed, Roberto's behavior became more frightening. He would threaten to hurt Maria Elena and the children. He would wave his hands around and shout about killing people. Maria Elena began to fear for their lives. She started sleeping with a knife under her pillow just in case. The children were also showing signs of the stress they lived with every day. Anna had stopped playing with other children and looked worried all the time. Carlos had nightmares and would wake up crying. Little Rosa had stopped talking as much and would jump whenever she heard loud noises. Maria Elena knew something had to change, but she did not know what to do. She felt trapped between her fear of Roberto and her love for her children. She prayed every night for God to help her family, but things only seemed to get worse. As winter approached in 1876, the family's situation became desperate. There was even less work at the mine, and Roberto was drinking more than ever. The little food they had was running out, and Maria Elena did not know how she would feed her children through the cold months ahead. She stood outside her house that evening, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. The air was getting colder and she could see her breath. Soon it would be dark and Roberto would come home drunk again. Maria Elena closed her eyes and made a silent prayer for strength. She had no idea that her prayers would soon be answered in the most terrible way possible. 2 weeks after that cold evening, Roberto lost his job at the mine. The mine owner said there was not enough work for all the men. Roberto was one of the last hired, so he was one of the first to go. When he came home that day, his face was dark with anger. "They threw me out like a dog," Roberto told Maria Elena. His breath smelled of alcohol even though it was still afternoon. "After all the years I worked for them, they just told me to leave." Maria Elena felt her heart sink. Without Roberto's wages, even the small ones he brought home, they would have no money at all. "Maybe you can find other work," she said quietly. "There might be jobs in the next village." Roberto laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "What jobs? There is no work anywhere. The whole country is falling apart." He kicked a pot across the room, making the children jump. Anna quickly took Carlos and Rosa outside to play. She had learned to get her younger siblings away when their father was in a bad mood. Maria Elena watched them go and wished she could follow them. That night, Roberto drank more than usual. He had used their last coins to buy pulque from the village store. Maria Elena said nothing, even though she knew those coins could have bought food for the children. She had learned that arguing with Roberto when he was drunk only made things worse. "This is all your fault," Roberto said, pointing at Maria Elena with a shaky finger. "You and those children, always wanting food, always needing things. A man can't think with all this noise and crying." Maria Elena stirred the pot of thin corn soup she was making for dinner. There was barely enough for the children, but she said nothing. She had not eaten anything that day except for a small piece of old bread. "Look at me when I talk to you," Roberto shouted. He grabbed Maria Elena's arm and spun her around. The wooden spoon fell from her hand and clattered on the floor. "I am listening," Maria Elena said softly. She could see that Roberto's eyes were red and wild. He was drunker than usual, and that made him more dangerous. "No, you are not," Roberto said. His grip on her arm tightened until it hurt. "You think you are better than me? You think I am a failure?" "I do not think that," Maria Elena said. "You are my husband, I respect you." But Roberto was not listening anymore. The alcohol had taken over his mind and he was lost in his own anger and shame. He had failed to provide for his family, and he knew it. Instead of trying to fix the problem, he wanted to blame someone else. "You respect me?" Roberto laughed again. "Then why do you look at me like that? Like I am dirt under your feet?" Maria Elena did not know what look he was talking about. She tried to keep her face calm and blank when Roberto was drinking, but he always found something to be angry about. Roberto let go of her arm and stumbled to the corner where he kept his bottles. He picked up a new bottle of pulque and took a long drink. "I should just leave," he said. "Find a new wife who appreciates me." "The children need their father," Maria Elena said. She immediately regretted speaking. She should have stayed quiet. "The children." Roberto's voice got louder. "Always the children. What about what I need? What about my suffering?" The children could hear their father shouting from outside. Ana held Rosa close while Carlos picked up small stones and threw them at a tree. They all wished they could run away and never come back. As the days passed, Roberto's behavior got worse. Without a job to go to, he spent all day drinking and feeling sorry for himself. He would sleep until noon, then start drinking immediately. By evening, he was completely drunk and looking for fights. Maria Elena tried to keep the children away from their father as much as possible. She sent them to help neighbors or to play far from the house. But they had to come home eventually, and Roberto was always there, drunk and angry. One night, Roberto decided that the family was eating too much food. He had been drinking all day and thinking about their problems. In his confused mind, he decided that Maria Elena and the children were taking food away from him. "From now on, I eat first," Roberto announced. "Whatever food there is, I get half. The rest of you can share what is left." Maria Elena stared at him. There was barely enough food for the children as it was. If Roberto took half, the children would starve. "The children are growing," she said carefully. "They need food to stay healthy." "I do not care," Roberto said. "I am the man of this house. I work to buy the food." He paused and laughed bitterly. "Well, I used to work, but I am still the man here." "You are drunk," Maria Elena said. It was the first time she had said this out loud, and the words surprised her. Roberto's face changed. His eyes got narrow and his mouth twisted into an ugly shape. "What did you say to me?" Maria Elena felt fear wash over her, but she could not take the words back. "You have been drinking all day. You are not thinking clearly." Roberto moved faster than Maria Elena expected. His hand hit her face hard, making her head snap to the side. She tasted blood in her mouth and felt her cheek burning. "Do not ever speak to me like that again," Roberto said. His voice was quiet, now, which was somehow more frightening than when he shouted, "I am your husband. You will show me respect." Maria Elena touched her cheek where he had hit her. It was already starting to swell. She looked at Roberto and saw a stranger. This was not the man she had married. This was someone else, someone dangerous. From that night on, Roberto's violence became more frequent. He would hit Maria Elena for small things like cooking the food wrong or looking at him the wrong way. He would threaten the children when they made noise or asked for food. Maria Elena tried to protect her children, but it was getting harder. Roberto seemed to enjoy scaring them. He would grab Ana's arm when she walked past him or shout at Carlos for no reason. Little Rosa learned to hide whenever she heard her father's voice. The worst night came 3 weeks after Roberto lost his job. He had managed to get more alcohol by trading some of their cooking pots. He was drunker than Maria Elena had ever seen him, and he was in a rage about something that had happened in the village. "Everyone thinks they are better than me," Roberto said, waving the bottle around. Some of the pulque spilled on the floor. "The mine owner, the other workers, even you." Maria Elena was trying to get the children ready for bed. She hoped Roberto would pass out soon like he usually did. But tonight felt different. Tonight he seemed more dangerous. Maybe you should rest, Maria Elena suggested. Tomorrow you can look for work again. Rest? Roberto laughed. How can I rest when my own family hates me? When my own wife thinks I am garbage? I do not think that, Maria Elena said. She was putting Rosa's small blanket over her while Ana and Carlos lay on their sleeping mats. Yes, you do, Roberto said. He stood up, swaying back and forth. You think I am a failure. You think you would be better off without me? Maria Elena felt a chill run down her back. There was something in Roberto's voice that scared her more than usual. You are my husband, she said. I would never think such things. Maybe I should just kill all of you, Roberto said suddenly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Then, I would not have to listen to your complaints anymore. Maria Elena froze. She looked at her children, who were pretending to sleep, but she could tell they were listening. Anna's eyes were wide with fear. You do not mean that, Maria Elena said. Her voice was shaking now. Do I not? Roberto asked. He picked up the kitchen knife that Maria Elena used for cutting vegetables. The blade caught the light from the fire. Maybe I should start with you. Then the children would learn to respect their father. Maria Elena felt something change inside her. She had been afraid of Roberto for months, but this was different. He was not just threatening to hit her anymore. He was talking about killing her and the children. Put the knife down, Maria Elena said. Her voice was stronger now. Or what? Roberto asked. He pointed the knife at her. What will you do? Maria Elena looked at her children, then back at Roberto. She realized that this night was different from all the others. Tonight, Roberto might actually do what he was threatening. Tonight, her children might die because of his drunken rage. For the first time in months, Maria Elena felt something other than fear. She felt anger. She felt the need to protect her babies. She felt like a mother bear whose cubs were in danger. I said, put the knife down, Maria Elena repeated. This time, her voice was hard as stone. Roberto smiled, but it was an evil smile. Make me, he said. Maria Elena stared at the knife in Roberto's hand. The blade was not very big, but it was sharp. She used it every day to cut vegetables and meat when they had any. Now her husband was pointing it at her like a weapon. I am waiting, Roberto said. His words came out slow and slurred. The alcohol had made him clumsy, but he was still dangerous. What are you going to do? Maria Elena could hear her children breathing behind her. Ana was trying to keep Carlos and Rosa quiet, but she could tell they were all terrified. The small room felt even smaller now, like the walls were closing in. Think about what you are doing, Maria Elena said. She kept her voice calm, even though her heart was beating very fast. These are your children, they love you. Roberto laughed, but it sounded more like a growl. Love me? They run away when they see me coming, just like you do. Because you scare them when you drink, Maria Elena said. But they are still your children. Maybe they would be better off dead, Roberto said. He took a step toward the children's sleeping area. Maybe we would all be better off dead. That was when Maria Elena knew she had to act. Roberto was not just making threats anymore. He was moving toward her babies with a knife in his hand. She could see in his eyes that the alcohol and anger had made him crazy. Maria Elena looked around the small room quickly. There was a heavy cooking pot near the fire. It was made of iron and was one of the few valuable things they owned. She had used it to cook thousands of meals for her family. Roberto took another step toward the children. Rosa started to cry softly. The sound seemed to make Roberto even more angry. Shut up, he yelled at the little girl. Stop crying or I will give you something to cry about. That was when Maria Elena moved. She grabbed the iron pot with both hands. It was heavy and still warm from cooking dinner. Roberto heard her move and started to turn around, but he was too slow. The alcohol had made his movements clumsy. Maria Elena swung the pot as hard as she could. It hit Roberto in the side of the head with a loud, dull sound. The knife flew out of his hand and clattered across the floor. Roberto stumbled sideways and fell against the wall. For a moment, nobody moved. Roberto touched his head where the pot had hit him. His hand came away with blood on it. He looked at the blood, then at Maria Elena, like he could not understand what had happened. "You hit me," he said. His voice sounded confused and small, like a child's. Maria Elena still held the pot in her hands. She was breathing hard and shaking. "You were going to hurt the children," she said. Roberto tried to stand up straight, but he was dizzy from the hit and the alcohol. "I am your husband," he said. "You cannot hit me." "I can if you try to hurt my babies," Maria Elena said. She had never felt so angry in her life. All the fear and sadness and hunger of the past months came together into one strong feeling. "I will not let you hurt them." Roberto pushed himself away from the wall. He was still bleeding from his head, but he was getting angry again. "I will kill you for this," he said. "I will kill all of you. All." He started walking toward Maria Elena, but his steps were unsteady. The hit from the pot had made him even more confused than the alcohol had. Maria Elena backed away, still holding the cooking pot. "Stay away from us," she said. "Just go to sleep and leave us alone." But Roberto was not listening anymore. The pain in his head and the taste of blood in his mouth had made him crazy with rage. He bent down and picked up the knife from where it had fallen. "Now you will pay," he said. He held the knife up and started toward Maria Elena again. Maria Elena knew she had to protect her children. Roberto was beyond reasoning now. The alcohol and the hit to his head had made him like a wild animal. She could see in his eyes that he really would try to kill them. When Roberto got close enough, Maria Elena swung the pot again. This time she hit him harder than before. The sound was louder and more terrible. Roberto's eyes rolled back in his head, and he fell to the ground. The knife fell from his hand again. This time Maria Elena quickly kicked it away from him. Roberto lay on the dirt floor, not moving. Blood was coming from his head and making a dark puddle. Maria Elena dropped the pot and knelt down next to Roberto. She put her ear close to his mouth to see if he was breathing. She could not hear anything. She put her hand on his chest to feel for his heartbeat. There was nothing. "Mama." Anna's voice was very small and scared. Maria Elena looked up at her children. They were all staring at her with wide eyes. She realized what had just happened. In trying to protect her children, she had killed their father. "Is Papa sleeping?" little Rosa asked. Maria Elena did not know what to say. Her hands were shaking and her mind was spinning. She had never hurt anyone in her life, not even an animal. But now Roberto was dead, and she had killed him. "Stay where you are," Maria Elena told the children. Her voice sounded strange, like it was coming from far away. "Do not come over here." Maria Elena touched Roberto's neck, looking for a pulse like she had seen the village healer do. There was nothing. His skin was already starting to feel cold. The blood from his head had stopped flowing. She sat back on her heels and tried to think. Roberto was dead. She had killed him. Even though she had been defending her children, she knew that no one would believe her. Women were not supposed to fight back against their husbands, no matter what the husbands did. If the village authorities found out what happened, they would probably hang her. Then her children would be orphans with no one to take care of them. They might starve or be sold into slavery. The thought of her children suffering made Maria Elena feel sick. "Mama, what is wrong with Papa?" Carlos asked. He was trying to be brave, but his voice was shaking. "Papa is..." Maria Elena started to say he was sleeping, but she could not lie to her children. "Not about this." "Papa is hurt," she said instead. "He is hurt very badly." Anna was 8 years old and smarter than her younger brother and sister. She could see the blood and the way Roberto was lying so still. "Is Papa dead?" she whispered. Maria Elena looked at her oldest daughter. Anna deserved to know the truth. "Yes," she said quietly. "Papa is dead." Rosa started to cry. Carlos looked confused, like he did not understand what dead meant. Anna just stared at Roberto's body with big, frightened eyes. "What are we going to do?" Anna asked. That was the question Maria Elena was asking herself. What could they do? If She told the truth about what happened, she would be punished. The authorities would not care that Roberto had threatened to kill the children. They would only care that a wife had killed her husband. Maria Elena looked around the small room. The blood on the floor, Roberto's body, the knife and the cooking pot. It looked like a scene from a nightmare. She felt like she was in a bad dream and could not wake up. But she was awake, and this was real. Roberto was dead, and she had to decide what to do next. She had to think about her children and their future. She had to think about survival. "We cannot tell anyone what happened," Maria Elena said to her children. "This has to be our secret." "But what about Papa?" Carlos asked. Maria Elena looked at Roberto's body again. He was a big man and she was small. She could not move him by herself and she could not ask for help. No one could know that Roberto was dead. "We have to make Papa disappear," she said. The words sounded crazy even to her own ears, but she could not think of any other choice. "How?" Anna asked. Maria Elena's mind was racing, trying to think of a solution. She thought about burying Roberto, but the ground was hard and she had no shovel. She thought about throwing his body in the river, but it was too far away and someone might see her. Then she thought about something else, something terrible but practical. She thought about the meat they had eaten when Roberto brought home a deer from hunting. She thought about how she had cut it up and cooked it to feed her family. The idea that came into her head was so horrible that she tried to push it away, but it kept coming back. Her children were hungry. They had not had meat in weeks, and Roberto's body was just lying there, taking up space and creating problems. Maria Elena felt like she was going crazy. Normal people did not think such thoughts. Normal mothers did not consider such solutions. But nothing about their life had been normal for a long time. She looked at her children's thin faces and remembered how Roberto had threatened to kill them. He had been willing to hurt innocent babies because of his own anger and selfishness. Now he was dead, and his body could serve a purpose. "Mama," Anna said, "what are you thinking about?" Maria Elena realized she had been staring at Roberto's body for a long time without speaking. Her children were waiting for her to tell them what to do. They trusted her to take care of them and keep them safe. "I am thinking about how to protect our family," Maria Elena said. It was true, even though she could not tell them exactly what she was considering. The fire in the corner was still burning. The cooking pot was still warm. And Maria Elena was starting to form a plan that would solve all their problems. It was a terrible plan, but she could not think of anything else. Her children needed food. Roberto's body needed to disappear. And no one could ever know what had happened in this room tonight. Maria Elena began to see a way to accomplish all three things at once. She just hoped God would forgive her for what she was about to do. Maria Elena sent her children outside while she tried to think clearly. "Go play by the big tree," she told them. "Do not come back until I call you." Anna looked worried. "But what about Papa?" "I will take care of Papa," Maria Elena said. "Just keep Carlos and Rosa away from the house for a while." After the children left, Maria Elena sat on the floor next to Roberto's body. She was shaking and her mind felt foggy. Everything that had happened seemed like a bad dream. But the blood on the floor and Roberto's cold skin proved it was real. She tried to think of normal solutions first. Maybe she could tell people that Roberto had left to look for work in another town. Men did that sometimes when jobs were scarce. The problem was Roberto's body. She could not leave it in the house and she could not bury it by herself. Maria Elena thought about asking for help from neighbors, but that was impossible. How could she explain Roberto's death? Even if she told the truth about defending her children, no one would believe her. Women were supposed to obey their husbands no matter what. The village had no real police, but there was a magistrate who handled serious crimes. If he found out what happened, Maria Elena would face punishment. She might be hanged or sent to prison. Either way, her children would be left alone with no one to care for them. As Maria Elena sat there thinking, she became aware of how quiet the house was. Without Roberto's angry voice and heavy footsteps, everything felt different. For the first time in months, she was not afraid. But now she had a much bigger problem to solve. She looked at Roberto's body and tried to see it not as her husband, but as a problem that needed solving. He was a big man, probably twice her weight. She could not move him very far, even if she dragged him. And if anyone saw her moving a body, they would ask questions she could not answer. Then Maria Elena remembered something her grandmother had told her long ago. During a terrible famine when her grandmother was young, people had done unspeakable things to survive. Families had eaten anything they could find, including things that normal people would never consider. The thought that entered Maria Elena's mind was so horrible that she tried to push it away, but it kept coming back, stronger each time. Roberto's body was meat. Her children were starving, and no one would ever know. Maria Elena stood up and walked to the corner where she kept her knives and cooking tools. She picked up the sharp knife that Roberto had threatened her with earlier. It felt heavy in her hand, heavier than usual. She had butchered chickens and pigs before when her family had been able to afford them. She knew how to cut meat and prepare it for cooking. The process would be the same, even though the source was different. But first she needed to think about the children. They could not see what she was about to do. They were too young to understand, and the sight might scar them for life. She would have to wait until they were asleep and work through the night. Maria Elena went outside and found her children, playing near the tree as she had asked. They looked up at her with worried faces. "Is Papa better now?" Rosa asked. Maria Elena knelt down and gathered her children close to her. "Papa is sleeping," she said. It was not exactly a lie. "He will not wake up anymore." "Is he dead like the baby bird we found?" Carlos asked. "Yes," Maria Elena said, "but we must not tell anyone. This is our family secret. Do you understand?" All three children nodded. Anna looked the most worried, but she was old enough to understand that something serious had happened. "What, will we tell people when they ask about Papa?" Anna asked. Maria Elena had thought about this. "We will say that Papa went to work in a faraway town. We will say he will not come back for a long time." "But that is not true," Carlos said. "Sometimes we have to say things that are not true to protect our family," Maria Elena explained. "This is one of those times." That evening, Maria Elena made a thin soup from their last bit of cornmeal. The children ate it quietly, still thinking about their father. After dinner, she told them stories until they fell asleep on their mats. When Maria Elena was sure the children were deeply asleep, she began the most difficult task of her life. She had never cut up anything larger than a chicken, but she knew the basic principles. She would have to work carefully and quietly. First, she moved Roberto's body to the area near the fire where she usually did her cooking. She laid out her sharpest knives and her largest pot. She also found some old cloth to wrap the pieces in. The work was much harder than she had expected. Roberto was heavy and difficult to move. The knife was not as sharp as she needed it to be, and her hands kept shaking. Several times she had to stop and rest because she felt sick. Maria Elena tried not to think about what she was doing. She tried to pretend she was just preparing meat for her family, like she had done hundreds of times before. But Roberto's face kept staring at her, making the work even more horrible. It took her most of the night to finish the job. By dawn, Roberto's body was gone. Instead, there were carefully wrapped packages of meat stored in various places around the house. Maria Elena had also burned his clothes and hair in the fire. The blood on the floor was harder to deal with. Maria Elena scrubbed it with water and sand until her hands were raw. She spread fresh dirt over the area and arranged their few possessions to cover any remaining stains. When the children woke up that morning, there was no sign that Roberto had ever been there. Maria Elena had cleaned everything and put away all the evidence. She had also prepared breakfast for her family. "Where is Papa?" Rosa asked, looking around the room. "I told you last night," Maria Elena said. "Papa went away to work. He left very early this morning." The breakfast was different from what they usually ate. Instead of thin corn soup, there was real meat. The children stared at their bowls in surprise. "Where did the meat come from?" Anna asked. Papa brought it home last night before he left, Maria Elena said. He wanted to make sure we had good food while he is away. The children were too hungry to ask more questions. They ate the meat eagerly, making happy sounds as they chewed. Maria Elena watched them eat and tried to feel glad that they were getting proper nutrition for the first time in weeks. But she could not eat any of the meat herself. Every time she tried to put a piece in her mouth, she felt sick. She made excuses about not being hungry and gave her portion to the children. This is the best meat I have ever tasted, Carlos said. It is very tender, Ana agreed. Maria Elena felt her stomach turn over, but she forced herself to smile. I am glad you like it, she said. Over the next few days, Maria Elena continued to feed her children the meat. She told them it was from a deer that Roberto had hunted before he left. The children believed her and were happy to have full stomachs for the first time in months. Maria Elena developed a system for cooking the meat. She would prepare it late at night when the children were asleep, adding spices and vegetables to change the taste. She made stews and roasted pieces over the fire. She was careful to cook everything thoroughly. The hardest part was watching her children eat. They were so happy to have real food that they laughed and played more than they had in months. Their faces filled out and they had more energy. Maria Elena knew she was keeping them alive, but the knowledge of how she was doing it made her feel sick. At night, Maria Elena could not sleep. She would lie on her mat and think about what she had done. She had killed her husband, and then cut up his body like an animal. She was feeding his meat to his own children. The thoughts went around and around in her head until she felt like she was going crazy. Sometimes Maria Elena would go outside in the middle of the night and vomit. The stress and guilt were eating away at her from the inside. She was keeping her children alive, but she was destroying herself in the process. During the day, Maria Elena had to act normal around the neighbors. She told them the same story she had told her children, that Roberto had gone to find work in another town. Most people accepted this explanation without question. Men leaving to find work was common. When will Roberto come back? Asked Senora Martinez, an older woman who lived nearby. He does not know yet, Maria Elena replied. It depends on how much work he finds. You must miss him, Senora Martinez said. Yes, Maria Elena lied. We miss him very much. But the truth was that Maria Elena did not miss Roberto at all. For the first time in months, she was not afraid. She did not have to worry about Roberto coming home drunk and violent. The house was peaceful, and the children were safe. The only problem was the terrible secret she was carrying. Every time she looked at her children eating, she remembered what she had done. Every time they asked about their father, she had to lie. Every night when she closed her eyes, she saw Roberto's face. Maria Elena began to wonder if she was becoming a monster. Normal people did not do what she had done. Normal mothers did not feed their children such things. But her children were alive and healthy, and that was what mattered most. After a week, most of the meat was gone. Maria Elena knew she would have to find other food soon, but for now her children were not hungry. They were growing stronger every day, and no one suspected what had really happened to Roberto. Maria Elena looked at her children playing outside and made herself a promise. She would never tell them the truth about what they had eaten. They would grow up believing their father had simply left to find work. The terrible secret would die with her. 3 weeks had passed since Roberto disappeared. Maria Elena was getting better at telling the story about her husband leaving for work. She had told it so many times that it almost felt true. But at night, when she was alone with her thoughts, the truth came back to haunt her. The meat was almost gone now. Maria Elena had been careful to make it last as long as possible, mixing it with beans and corn to stretch each meal. Her children had grown stronger and healthier during these weeks. Their faces were fuller, and they had more energy to play and laugh. But Maria Elena herself looked worse than ever. She had lost weight because she could barely force herself to eat anything. Her skin was pale, and dark circles had appeared under her eyes. She jumped at every unexpected sound and had trouble sleeping. "Mama, you look sick," Ana said one morning. "Are you eating enough?" "I am fine," Maria Elena lied. "I am just worried about Papa." It was true that she was worried, but not in the way Anna thought. Maria Elena was worried that someone would discover what had really happened. Every day that passed without suspicion was a small victory, but she could never relax completely. The neighbors had stopped asking about Roberto as much. In their village, it was common for men to leave for weeks or months to find work. Women were used to managing alone while their husbands searched for jobs in other towns or cities. But some people were starting to notice things. Senora Martinez commented that Maria Elena's children looked healthier than they had in months. "You must have found some good food while Roberto has been away," she said. "We have been careful with our money," Maria Elena replied. "And the children are eating less now that they are not so hungry all the time." This was partially true. The children were eating less now because their stomachs had adjusted to being full. But Maria Elena knew the real reason they looked healthier, and it made her feel sick every time someone mentioned it. Another neighbor, Don Carlos, asked about Roberto's belongings. "I noticed Roberto left some tools behind," he said. "If he is not coming back soon, maybe I could borrow his saw." Maria Elena realized she had made a mistake. If Roberto had really left to find work, he would have taken his tools with him. A man's tools were his most valuable possessions. "He was in a hurry," she said quickly. "He said he would send for his things later." Don Carlos looked puzzled but did not argue. Maria Elena made a note to herself to be more careful about such details. She would have to get rid of Roberto's belongings gradually, making it look like he had asked for them to be sold. Over the next few days, Maria Elena began selling Roberto's things one by one. She sold his extra clothes to a traveling merchant. She traded his tools for food and supplies. She told everyone that Roberto had sent word asking her to sell these items and send him the money. The hardest part was when people asked for details about Roberto's work. Where exactly was he working? What kind of job had he found? When would he return? Maria Elena had to invent answers on the spot, and she worried that her stories might not match up. "Roberto is working at a mine about 50 miles north of here," she told one person. "He found a job helping to build a road," she told another. "The work might last for several months," she said to a third. Maria Elena tried to keep her stories vague so she would not contradict herself later. But she was not used to lying, and the effort of keeping track of all her false statements was exhausting. The children were also asking more questions about their father. At first, they had been satisfied with simple answers, but as the weeks passed, they wanted to know more details. "When will Papa send us a letter?" Carlos asked. Maria Elena had not thought about letters. Roberto could not read or write, so he would not be able to send letters. But Carlos was too young to understand this. "Papa is very busy with work," she said. "He does not have time to write letters." "Can we visit him?" Rosa asked. "The place where he is working is very far away," Maria Elena explained. "It would take many days to get there, and we do not have enough money for the trip." Anna, being older, asked more difficult questions. "Why did Papa leave without saying goodbye to us properly?" she wanted to know. "He did not want to wake you up so early in the morning," Maria Elena said. "And he was sad about leaving. Sometimes it is easier to leave quietly than to say goodbye." These conversations were torture for Maria Elena. She hated lying to her children, but she saw no other choice. If they knew the truth, they would be traumatized, and if they accidentally told someone else, the whole family would be in danger. At night, Maria Elena's guilt became almost unbearable. She would lie awake remembering every detail of that terrible night. She could still see Roberto's angry face, still hear the sound of the cooking pot hitting his head, still feel the weight of the knife in her hand. Sometimes she wondered if she was going crazy. She would have conversations with Roberto in her mind, arguing with him about what had happened. She would try to explain why she had to do what she did, but imaginary Roberto never understood. The worst moments came when Maria Elena looked at her children eating the last pieces of meat. They would smile and thank her for the good food, not knowing what they were really eating. Each bite they took felt like another weight added to Maria Elena's soul. "This meat tastes different from what we usually eat," Anna said one evening. Maria Elena's heart stopped for a moment. Different how? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. It is more tender, Anna said, and it has a richer flavor. What kind of animal did Papa hunt? It was a special kind of deer, Maria Elena said, one that lives deep in the mountains. Anna seemed satisfied with this answer, but the conversation left Maria Elena shaking. She realized that her children might notice other things if she was not careful. She would have to be more creative with her cooking to disguise any unusual qualities of the meat. As the meat supply dwindled, Maria Elena faced a new problem. Soon there would be nothing left, and she would have to find other ways to feed her family. They had a little money from selling Roberto's belongings, but it would not last long. Maria Elena considered looking for work, but opportunities for women were limited. She could wash clothes for wealthy families or help with cooking at special events. But the pay was very small and she would have to leave her children alone. One day, while Maria Elena was at the market buying cornmeal, she overheard two women talking about Roberto. I have not seen Roberto Vasquez for weeks, one woman said. Usually he is at the cantina every night. His wife says he went to find work, the other woman replied. But it seems strange that he would stay away so long without coming back to visit. Men are unpredictable, the first woman said. Maybe he found a new woman in the city. This conversation gave Maria Elena an idea. If people thought Roberto might have abandoned his family for another woman, they would be less likely to look for him. It was shameful, but it happened sometimes. Next time someone asked about Roberto, Maria Elena hinted that he might not be coming back. Men sometimes find new lives when they go away, she said sadly. I am trying to prepare for the possibility that Roberto might not return. This explanation seemed to satisfy most people. Women whose husbands had abandoned them were pitied rather than questioned. The community would be more likely to help Maria Elena and her children if they thought she was a victim rather than a widow. But living with the lie was becoming harder every day. Maria Elena felt like she was carrying a huge weight on her shoulders. The secret was eating away at her from the inside, making her thin and nervous. She started having nightmares almost every night. In her dreams, Roberto would come back to life and accuse her of murder. Sometimes she dreamed that the authorities had discovered what she had done and were coming to arrest her. Other times she dreamed that her children found out the truth and looked at her with horror and disgust. Maria Elena began talking to herself when she thought no one was listening. She would mutter prayers and apologies, asking God and Roberto to forgive her. She knew what she had done was terrible, but she could not change it now. The children noticed that their mother was acting strangely. She would suddenly stop talking in the middle of conversations, as if she had forgotten what she was saying. She would stare off into space for long periods. Sometimes they would find her crying for no apparent reason. Mama, are you sad because Papa is away? Rosa asked one day. Yes, Maria Elena said. It was easier to let her children think she was grieving for Roberto than to explain her real feelings. Maybe Papa will come home soon, Carlos said, trying to comfort his mother. Maybe, Maria Elena agreed, even though she knew Roberto would never come home. She had made sure of that. As the weeks turned into a month, Maria Elena realized that she had successfully created a new life for her family. Roberto was gone, and no one suspected what had really happened to him. Her children were healthy and safe. She had accomplished what she set out to do, but the cost had been enormous. Maria Elena felt like she had lost her soul in the process of saving her children. She was no longer the same person she had been before that terrible night. She was someone who had done unspeakable things, someone who could lie to her own children without hesitation. Maria Elena wondered if the guilt would ever go away. She wondered if she would ever be able to sleep peacefully again. She wondered if God could forgive someone who had done what? 2 months after Roberto's disappearance, a stranger came to the village. He was a tall, thin man with a serious face and clothes that showed he had traveled far. He asked several people about Roberto Vasquez before coming to Maria Elena's house. Good afternoon, Señora, the man said, removing his hat politely. My name is Miguel Vasquez. I am Roberto's brother. Maria Elena felt her blood turn cold, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had not known that Roberto had a brother. Roberto had never mentioned any family, and no relatives had ever visited them. I did not know Roberto had a brother, she said carefully. We have not spoken in many years, Miguel explained. There was a disagreement between us when we were young men, but I heard that Roberto might be having troubles, so I came to see if I could help. Maria Elena invited Miguel into their small house, her mind racing. She had to be very careful about what she said. This man was Roberto's blood relative, and he might know things about Roberto that could contradict her story. Who told you that? Roberto was having troubles, she asked. A traveling merchant who came through my town, Miguel said. He said Roberto had lost his job at the mine and was drinking heavily. I thought perhaps Roberto might need assistance from his family. Maria Elena served Miguel some water and tried to think quickly. Roberto did lose his job, she admitted. That part is true. But he found new work in a town far from here. He left almost 2 months ago. Miguel looked around the small house. Maria Elena was glad she had already sold most of Roberto's belongings. It would have been hard to explain why a man's tools and clothes were still there if he had really left for work. What kind of work did Roberto find? Miguel asked. Construction work, Maria Elena said. They are building new roads in the northern territories. The pay is good, but the work is far from home. That sounds like Roberto, Miguel said. He was always good with his hands, but it is strange that he has not sent word to his family. When did you last hear from him? Maria Elena felt trapped. She had told other people that Roberto could not read or write, so he would not be able to send letters, but she did not know if Miguel knew this about his brother. Roberto has never been good at writing letters, she said carefully, and he is very busy with the work. I expect to hear from him soon. Miguel nodded, but Maria Elena could see doubt in his eyes. May I speak with the children? He asked. I would like to meet my nephew and nieces. Maria Elena called the children inside. They were curious about this stranger who claimed to be their uncle. Miguel studied their faces carefully, looking for family resemblances. You look like your father, he told Carlos. And you have his strong chin, he said to Ana. The children answered Miguel's questions politely. They repeated the story their mother had taught them about Roberto going away for work, but Maria Elena noticed that Miguel seemed to be listening for something specific in their answers. After Miguel left, Maria Elena felt more worried than she had in weeks. Roberto's brother seemed suspicious about something. He had asked too many detailed questions, and he had been watching her face closely when she answered. That evening, Maria Elena learned that Miguel was staying in the village for several days. He was asking other people about Roberto, trying to piece together what had happened. This was exactly what Maria Elena had been afraid of. The next morning, Don Fernando Herrera, the village magistrate, came to visit Maria Elena. Don Fernando was an older man who handled legal matters for the village. His visit meant that Miguel had spoken to him about Roberto's disappearance. Señora Vasquez, Don Fernando said formally, I understand that your husband has been away for some time. Roberto's brother has expressed concern about his welfare. Roberto is working in the north, Maria Elena said, repeating her story once again. There is nothing to be concerned about. When exactly did Roberto leave? Don Fernando asked, taking out a small notebook to write down her answers. It was about 2 months ago, Maria Elena said. Early in the morning on a Tuesday. She had practiced these details many times, but saying them to the magistrate felt different and more dangerous. Did anyone see him leave? Don Fernando asked. This was a question Maria Elena had been dreading. He left very early before dawn, she said. He did not want to wake the children by saying goodbye. And he took his belongings with him? He took some clothes and his tools, Maria Elena lied. He said he would send for the rest later. Don Fernando wrote everything down carefully. Miguel says that Roberto was drinking heavily before he left. Is this true? Maria Elena hesitated. Many people in the village knew about Roberto's drinking problem. If she denied it, Don Fernando would know she was lying. Roberto had been drinking more than usual, she admitted. but he stopped when he decided to look for work. I see, Don Fernando said. And you have received no word from him since he left? No, Maria Elena said. But I expect to hear from him soon. After Don Fernando left, Maria Elena felt sick with worry. The magistrate had seemed skeptical about her story. And with Miguel asking questions around the village, more people might start to doubt what had really happened to Roberto. That afternoon, Senora Martinez came to visit Maria Elena. The older woman looked concerned and nervous. People are talking, Senora Martinez said quietly. Miguel has been asking everyone about Roberto. Some people are starting to wonder if something bad happened to your husband. What kind of something bad? Maria Elena asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Some people think Roberto might have been robbed and killed on the road, Senora Martinez said. Others think he might have had an accident. A few people even wonder if what? Maria Elena prompted. If something happened to him here, in the village, Senora Martinez finished. Before he supposedly left, Maria Elena felt dizzy. That is ridiculous, she said. I told everyone that Roberto left for work. Why would people think otherwise? Because it seems strange that he would leave without saying goodbye to anyone, Senora Martinez explained. Roberto was not a quiet man. People would have expected him to boast about finding new work, or at least to have a farewell drink with his friends. This was exactly what Maria Elena had been afraid of. She had been so focused on hiding Roberto's body and feeding her children that she had not thought carefully enough about how Roberto's departure would appear to other people. Also, Senora Martinez continued, some people noticed that your children looked much healthier right after Roberto supposedly left. They wonder where you got the money to buy better food. Maria Elena's heart was pounding. We had been saving a little money, she said, and Roberto left us some coins before he departed. But she could see that Senora Martinez was not entirely convinced. The older woman was trying to be kind, but she clearly had doubts about Maria Elena's story. That evening, Miguel came to visit again. This time he was not alone. He had brought Don Fernando with him, and both men looked very serious. Senora Vasquez, Don Fernando said, we have been investigating your husband's disappearance. Some facts do not seem to match your account of events. Maria Elena tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. What facts? She asked. First, several people saw Roberto on the night before you say he left, Miguel said. He was very drunk and seemed angry about something, but no one saw him leave the next morning. Second, Don Fernando continued, Roberto's drinking companions say he was talking about getting revenge on someone that night. They thought he meant his former employer at the mine, but now they are not sure. Third, Miguel added, some neighbors reported hearing shouting from your house very late that night. Then everything was quiet. Maria Elena felt like the walls of the room were closing in on her. These men had been investigating carefully, and they had found inconsistencies in her story. I do not know what people think they heard, she said. Roberto left early the next morning, just as I told you. There is one more thing, Don Fernando said. Several people noticed a strange smell coming from your house about a week after Roberto supposedly left. They described it as the smell of cooking meat, but much stronger than usual. Maria Elena's mind went blank. She had tried to be careful about cooking the meat, but the smell must have been stronger than she realized. I had found some old meat that had started to spoil, she said desperately. I had to cook it thoroughly to make it safe to eat. Miguel and Don Fernando looked at each other. Maria Elena could tell they did not believe her explanation. Where did this meat come from? Miguel asked. Your neighbors say your family had been very poor and had not eaten meat in months. A hunter gave it to me, Maria Elena said. But even as she said it, she knew how weak it sounded. Which hunter? Don Fernando asked. We can speak to him to confirm your story. Maria Elena could not think of a name quickly enough. Her silence lasted too long, and both men noticed. Senora Vasquez, Don Fernando said gently. I think it would be better if you told us the truth about what happened to your husband. Maria Elena looked at the two men and realized that her carefully constructed lies were falling apart. Miguel's investigation had uncovered too many contradictions. The neighbors had noticed too many suspicious details, but she could not tell them the truth. If she admitted to killing Roberto, she would be executed or imprisoned. Her children would become orphans. 3 days after Miguel and Don Fernando's visit, Maria Elena woke up to find several men gathered outside her house. Along with the magistrate and Roberto's brother, there were 4 other village men who sometimes helped with official business. They all looked very serious. Don Fernando knocked on her door. "Señora Vasquez, we need to search your property," he announced. "We have received information that suggests your husband may have met with violence here." Maria Elena's heart felt like it stopped beating. "What information?" she asked, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. "One of your neighbors remembered hearing sounds of a fight from your house on the night Roberto disappeared," Miguel explained. She was afraid to speak up before, but she decided to tell us what she heard. Maria Elena knew this was the end. If they searched the property carefully, they would find evidence of what she had done. She had tried to clean everything, but she was not skilled at hiding such terrible secrets. "You cannot search my house without proof of a crime," she said, desperately trying to think of some way to stop them. "We have enough suspicious circumstances to justify a search," Don Fernando replied. "Please step aside and allow us to do our work." Maria Elena had no choice but to let the men into her home. She gathered her children and told them to sit quietly in the corner while the adults looked around. Ana could tell something was very wrong, but the younger children did not understand what was happening. The men began their search systematically. They looked through all of Maria Elena's belongings, examined the walls and floor, and checked every corner of the small house. Maria Elena watched them, trying to appear calm while her mind raced with panic. At first, the searchers found nothing unusual. Maria Elena had been very careful to clean everything and get rid of Roberto's belongings. For a moment, she began to hope that they would not find any evidence. But then Miguel noticed something strange about the floor near the fire. "The dirt here looks different," he said, kneeling down to examine the area more closely. "It is darker than the rest, and it has been disturbed recently." Don Fernando joined Miguel in examining the floor. They began digging carefully with their hands, removing the layer of fresh dirt that Maria Elena had spread over the bloodstains. "There is definitely something here," Don Fernando said. "The soil underneath is much darker, as if it has been stained with something." One of the other men brought a shovel from outside. They began digging more seriously, removing layers of dirt to see what was underneath. Maria Elena watched in horror as they uncovered the evidence she had tried so hard to hide. "This dirt is definitely stained with blood," Miguel announced. "And there is a lot of it." The men continued digging and found small pieces of bone and other remains that Maria Elena had missed when she cleaned up. There was no way to explain away what they were finding. "Señora Vasquez," Don Fernando said, standing up and brushing dirt from his hands. "I think you need to tell us what really happened to your husband." Maria Elena looked at her children, who were staring at the men with wide, frightened eyes. She knew she could not continue lying. The evidence was right there in front of everyone. But she also knew that telling the truth would destroy everything. "I do not know what that is," she said weakly, pointing at the stained dirt. "Maybe an animal died there long ago." But even as she said it, Maria Elena knew how ridiculous it sounded. The stains were too fresh, and there was too much blood for it to be from a small animal. Miguel stood up and looked directly at Maria Elena. "These stains are recent," he said, "and they are in the exact spot where Roberto would have been standing if someone attacked him in this room." Don Fernando nodded grimly. "We also found this," he said, holding up a small piece of cloth. "It appears to be torn from a man's shirt and it has blood on it." Maria Elena recognized the cloth. It was from Roberto's shirt, the one he had been wearing on the night he died. She thought she had burned all of his clothes, but apparently she had missed a piece. "Señora Vasquez," Don Fernando said formally, "I am placing you under suspicion of murder." You will need to come with us for questioning." "What about my children?" Maria Elena asked, panic rising in her voice. "They will be cared for by neighbors until this matter is resolved," Don Fernando replied. Maria Elena felt her world collapsing around her. Everything she had done to protect her children was about to be destroyed. They would learn the truth about their father's death, and they would probably be taken away from her forever. "Wait," Maria Elena said suddenly. "There is something I need to tell you." All the men stopped what they were doing and looked at her. Maria Elena realized that this was her last chance to control how the truth came out. If she confessed now, maybe she could at least explain why she had done what she did. "Children," she said to Ana, Carlos, and Rosa, "go outside and play. Do not come back until I call you." Ana looked scared and confused, but she took her younger siblings outside as their mother had asked. Maria Elena watched them go, knowing this might be the last time she saw them as free children. When the children were gone, Maria Elena turned back to the men. "Roberto is dead," she said quietly. "I killed him." The men exchanged glances, but no one seemed surprised. They had already suspected this from the evidence they had found. "Why?" Miguel asked. His voice was sad rather than angry. "What happened?" Maria Elena took a deep breath and told them the story of that terrible night. She explained about Roberto's drinking and violence. She described how he had threatened to kill her and the children. She told them about the fight and how Roberto had come at her with a knife. "I was protecting my children," she said. "Roberto was going to hurt them. I could see it in his eyes. He was drunk and crazy, and he was going to kill us all." Don Fernando listened to her story without interrupting. When she finished, he asked, "What did you do with Roberto's body?" This was the part of the truth that Maria Elena did not want to tell. She knew it would sound horrible and unbelievable, but she had already confessed to murder. She might as well tell the whole truth. "I cut up his body," she said, her voice barely audible. "And I fed the meat to my children." The silence that followed was deafening. All the men stared at Maria Elena with expressions of shock and disgust. Even though they had come expecting to find evidence of murder, none of them had imagined anything like this. "You fed your children their father's flesh?" Miguel asked, his voice filled with horror. "They were starving," Maria Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "We had no food and no money to buy any. Roberto's body was just lying there, and I thought it could serve a purpose." "Dear God," one of the other men whispered, crossing himself. Don Fernando sat down heavily on a wooden stool. "Señora Vasquez," he said, "this is the most terrible crime I have ever heard of. Not only did you kill your husband, but you desecrated his body and committed an act of cannibalism." "I was trying to keep my children alive," Maria Elena pleaded. "I was trying to protect them and feed them. I did not know what else to do." Miguel was staring at the floor where his brother's blood had been found. "Roberto had his faults," he said quietly, "but he did not deserve this. No man deserves to be butchered like an animal." "He was going to kill us," Maria Elena repeated. "All of us. I saw it in his eyes that night. If I had not stopped him, we would all be dead now. But to cut up his body," Don Fernando shook his head, "to feed his flesh to his own children. How could you do such a thing?" Maria Elena could not explain it in a way that these men would understand. They had never been desperately hungry. They had never faced the choice between watching their children starve or doing something unspeakable. They could not imagine the desperation that had driven her to such extremes. "Where are the remains now?" Miguel asked. "There are no remains," Maria Elena admitted. "We ate everything." This revelation caused another shocked silence. The men looked at each other with expressions of revulsion and disbelief. "The children," Don Fernando said suddenly. "Do they know what they ate?" "No," Maria Elena said quickly. "I told them it was meat from a deer that Roberto had hunted. They never knew the truth. And they must never know," Miguel said firmly. "Those innocent children should not have to carry such a burden." Don Fernando stood up and looked at Maria Elena with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Señora Vasquez, You will be taken to the regional capital to face trial for murder. What happens to your children will depend on whether any relatives can be found to care for them. Please, Maria Elena begged, do not tell them the truth about what they ate. Let them remember their father as a man who went away to work. Do not destroy their innocence. Miguel looked at the other men, then back at Maria Elena. We will not tell the children about the cannibalism, he promised. They will be told that their father died in an accident and that their mother is being taken away for other reasons. It was a small mercy, but Maria Elena was grateful for it. At least, her children would not have to live with the knowledge of what they had eaten. They would grow up believing they were normal children whose father had died and whose mother had been taken away. As the men prepared to take Maria Elena away, she asked for one last moment with her children. She called them back into the house and knelt down to hug them. I have to go away for a while, she told them. These men are going to... The trial of Maria Elena Vasquez began 3 weeks after her arrest. The courtroom in the regional capital was packed with people who had come to hear the details of the most shocking crime anyone could remember. Newspaper reporters from Mexico City had even traveled to cover the story. Judge Alejandro Morales, a stern man with gray hair and tired eyes, presided over the proceedings. He had handled many criminal cases during his career, but nothing had prepared him for this one. Maria Elena sat in the defendant's chair, wearing a simple black dress that someone had given her. She looked much thinner than she had been during her arrest, and her hands shook constantly. The stress of the past weeks had taken a heavy toll on her body and mind. The prosecutor, a young lawyer named Ricardo Santos, presented the case against Maria Elena. He described the crime in detail, emphasizing the brutal nature of both the murder and what he called the desecration of the corpse. This woman not only killed her husband, Santos declared, but she committed an act so heinous that it defies human understanding. She butchered Roberto Vasquez like an animal and fed his flesh to innocent children. The courtroom gasped at these words, even though most people had already heard rumors about what Maria Elena had done. Hearing it stated so bluntly in official proceedings made it seem even more shocking. Maria Elena's defense lawyer was an older man named Joaquin Herrera, who had been appointed by the court because she could not afford to hire her own attorney. He was experienced but overwhelmed by the nature of the case. Your Honor, Herrera said when it was his turn to speak, my client does not deny that she killed her husband, but she acted in self-defense, protecting herself and her children from a violent drunken man who had threatened to murder them all. Herrera presented evidence of Roberto's history of domestic violence. Several neighbors testified that they had often heard shouting and sounds of fighting from the Vasquez house. The village priest confirmed that Maria Elena had come to him for help dealing with Roberto's drinking and violence. Roberto Vasquez was a dangerous man, Herrera argued. On the night of his death, he was drunk and armed with a knife. He had threatened to kill his wife and children. Maria Elena acted to save their lives. But when it came to explaining what Maria Elena had done with Roberto's body, Herrera struggled to find adequate words. My client was desperate, he said. She was a mother trying to feed her starving children. Her actions afterward, while shocking, were born of maternal instinct and extreme poverty. The prosecutor responded harshly to this defense. Poverty does not excuse cannibalism, Santosi declared. Thousands of people in Mexico are poor and hungry, but they do not resort to eating human flesh. This woman crossed a line that separates civilized people from savages. Several witnesses testified during the trial. Miguel Vasquez told the court about Roberto's history of violence and drinking, but he also expressed his horror at what had happened to his brother's body. Don Fernando described the investigation and the discovery of evidence in Maria Elena's house. The most difficult testimony came from Dr. Carmen Lopez, a physician who had examined the crime scene. She explained in clinical terms what Maria Elena had done to Roberto's body, describing the process of dismemberment and the evidence that the meat had been cooked and consumed. In my professional opinion, Dr. Lopez said, the defendant had considerable knowledge of butchering techniques. The cuts were made with precision, suggesting that this was not a spontaneous act of madness, but a deliberate process carried out over several hours. When Maria Elena was called to testify on her own behalf, She told her story in a quiet, steady voice. She described the years of abuse, the night Roberto threatened her children, and the moment when she felt she had no choice but to fight back. Amrandrar was not trying to kill Roberto, she said. I was trying to stop him from hurting my babies. When I hit him with the pot, I just wanted him to drop the knife and leave us alone. But when the prosecutor asked her about what she did afterward, Maria Elena's voice became even quieter. My children were starving, she said. We had no food and no money. I looked at Roberto's body and I thought it could feed them. Did you not consider that what you were doing was wrong? Santos asked. I knew it was wrong, Maria Elena replied. But watching my children starve was also wrong. I chose to save them, no matter what it cost me. And you fed them their father's flesh without telling them what it was? They were innocent, Maria Elena said. They did not deserve to carry that burden. I told them it was deer meat and they believed me. They were happy to have full stomachs. For the first time in months, the courtroom was completely silent during this exchange. Many people were crying, including some of the men on the jury. Even the judge looked disturbed by what he was hearing. The trial lasted for 5 days. When it came time for the jury to deliberate, they spent only 2 hours discussing the case before reaching their verdict. We find the defendant guilty of murder, the jury foreman announced. But we recommend mercy in sentencing, given the extreme circumstances that led to the crime. Judge Morales took a full day to consider the sentence. When court reconvened, he addressed Maria Elena directly. Señora Vasquez, he said, you have been found guilty of one of the most shocking crimes in the history of this region. What you did to your husband's body was an act that violates every principle of human decency. Maria Elena stood to hear her sentence, her legs shaking beneath her. However, the judge continued, this court recognizes that you acted initially in defense of your children, and that your subsequent actions were driven by maternal desperation and extreme poverty. Therefore, I sentence you to 15 years of hard labor, rather than the death penalty that this crime might normally warrant. Maria Elena felt her knees give out, and she had to grab the chair to keep from falling. 15 years was a long time, but it was not death. There was a chance, however small, that she might someday see her children again. After the trial, Maria Elena was taken to a women's prison in Mexico City. The conditions there were harsh, and many inmates died from disease or overwork. But Maria Elena was determined to survive her sentence and return to her children. News of the trial spread throughout Mexico, and even reached other countries. Newspapers called it the Oaxaca cannibal case and the mother's terrible choice. The story became famous as an example of how poverty and desperation could drive people to unthinkable acts. Some people condemned Maria Elena as a monster who deserved death. Others saw her as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Religious leaders debated whether her actions could ever be forgiven by God. Social reformers used her case to argue for better support for poor families and stronger laws against domestic violence. Meanwhile, Maria Elena's children were placed with different families in the village. Ana went to live with a childless couple who ran a small store. Carlos was taken in by a farmer who needed help with his land. Little Rosa was adopted by an elderly woman whose own children had grown up and moved away. The children were told that their father had died in an accident and that their mother was in prison for a different crime. They were never told the truth about what they had eaten during those weeks after Roberto's disappearance. The adults in the village agreed that this knowledge would be too terrible for children to bear. As the years passed, the 3 siblings grew up in different households. They saw each other occasionally at village festivals and church services, but they were no longer a family unit. Each child dealt with the loss of their parents in their own way. Ana, the oldest, remembered the most about what had happened. She often had nightmares about the night her father died, even though she had not witnessed the actual killing. She grew up to be a serious, quiet woman who never married and spent her life helping other families in need. Carlos tried to forget about his early childhood entirely. He focused on his work and eventually became a successful farmer. He married and had children of his own, but he never spoke to them about his real parents. As far as his new family knew, he was an orphan who had been raised by kind people. Rosa, being the youngest, had the fewest memories of her original family. She grew up believing that the elderly woman who raised her was her real grandmother. She lived a relatively normal life, though she sometimes had strange dreams about a woman with sad eyes who used to hold her. Maria Elena served 12 years of her 15-year sentence before being released for good behavior. When she returned to her village, she found that everything had changed. Many of the people she had known were dead or had moved away. Her children, now adults, had built their own lives. Maria Elena tried to reconnect with Ana, Carlos, and Rosa, but the years of separation had created an unbridgeable gap. They were polite to her but distant, and it was clear that they saw her more as a stranger than as their mother. Ana agreed to meet with Maria Elena once, but the conversation was awkward and painful. "I remember some things about that night," Ana said. "I remember being scared, and I remember you telling us to go outside, but I do not remember you as my mother anymore." Carlos refused to see Maria Elena at all. He had built a respectable life for himself, and he did not want to be associated with the scandal of his birth family.